Okay, so I just realized something a couple days ago. We are more than halfway through the month of October, officially designated as a spooky season around here, and I don't have one review up in the spirit of that. So this one is going to be about the film Pearl, written and directed by Ty West, also co-written by Mia Goth, and let's just talk about it. So this is another one of those films that, were it not for my sister, I probably would not have watched it. It's just not one I would have picked to watch. Um, I had the feeling that it was going to be too disturbing for me, and I'm not against horror movies, slasher films. I watch those films too. Sometimes though, you can get a sense of a different type of movie, and you make a decision whether or not you want to have that in your system. This was one based on a trailer I'd seen in another movie I was watching. I can't remember what we went to go see, but the trailer was disturbing enough for me to go, you know what? I don't think I'm going to watch that. So fast forward to whatever this week, my sister, she'd been asking me for weeks to go see it. She wanted to see X and see Pearl. So we saw X. Well, she'd seen X already separately. She really wanted to see it. But then she thought it was so good that she recommended I watch it and that she watch it with me. So we watched X, and the next day we went to go see Pearl. And now, having seen them, I'm talking specifically both of them. I enjoyed both movies. I was pleasantly surprised, and I was also sufficiently disturbed a little bit, but not as much as I thought it was going to be. So that's a win, I think. But so many cool things about this movie to talk about. Number one, I think the fact that these films are period pieces and that they more or less stay true to what you might see in film during the time in which they were set, that's cool to me. I really appreciate the attention to detail on screen with the production design is cool. You really feel like you're in the time period in a way that you don't always feel with some other period pieces. And I think, and I think part of that is the dialogue helps too, and the ways in which people are speaking, the certain actor, how actors are, their inflections and stuff are specific to the time and or specific to the time, which technically it's really about. You think of a character like the projectionist, for instance. His dialogue, the way he speaks, feels very much like a film, a good maybe 20 years, 15, 20 years after the time in which the film was set. Now, this is not to say that people didn't talk like that in films in the 1910s, but because that was still the silent era, we don't know. We don't really know how people sounded, and that doesn't really come into play really until the talkies, when the talkies come in, which is about 10 years ish later, in the late 20s, 1926, 28, around there, you'll get some of the first sound pictures, and you start hearing how people talk in movies anyway. And anyway, that's kind of cool that's that is incorporated into the film, because it really feels like you're watching a movie from that time, just with more modern film sensibilities in terms of the technicalities, camera work, and certain shots and things like that. The other thing that's cool is the color palette. It's like this Technicolor look, which is again not something you would have seen in the 1910s, because they weren't doing color pictures during that time. Really, you start seeing that stuff around like late 20s, early 30s. Films like The Wizard of Oz was a major Technicolor situation. Gone with the Wind, those are films. Or good 20 years after the time period in which this is set, but it's cool that's there, because it sort of harkens back to sort of old Hollywood, golden age of Hollywood. That's cool. I really liked that about the film. Narratively, I think what you have is sound. What's cool about it, you have okay. So Pearl's story really takes place uh, at in somewhere in in the United States in the 1910s and stuff. The backdrop you've got has the Great War, also known as World War I, and the pandemic of that time taking place. On the surface, those two things, at least to me, felt like those things could conflict somehow with how the story is being told. But you get to see how that impacts Pearl's journey and the overall story. How does the pandemic impact Pearl? Well, her dad is suffering from. He's a victim of the ailments. That's part of the issue. And the war, she's a young wife. She's married. Her husband's off in the war, so she's got to deal with loneliness. She's got to deal with different things in relation to that impact the different choices she makes, which is cool. And it actually is ripe for tight storytelling because this is her story. So that's cool. I'm going to shift gears a second and talk about the slasher film, or the horror film, as it were. What I find interesting about this film in particular, because when you look at the time period of the film and when it's set or whatever it is, and the notion of a slasher film, a horror film, there weren't really those types of films, these sort of subgenre films in the 1910s. Obviously, film was still very new, and it's just sort of discovering what it's about and discovering what to say about stuff. And as a newish medium, a lot of whimsical, a lot of different things, a lot of other stories. There are some epics and different things being told during that time. But the notion of a slasher or horror, really, in the ways that we know it now, didn't really exist. So it's interesting to see how you can take a simple premise, which is you have this young woman and who is going to become frankly a monster, and this story is about how she gets to that point. We've met her in the previous film in X, but as an old woman, so now we get to see her journey, how she gets to that place. And that's fascinating because you really, when you have a story that's sort of simple in its premise, you can really that's not a bad thing. You can do things that actually make it, depending on how it's executed, make it meaningful, and make it still make it entertaining, and make it something that leaves audiences with something to think about. The slasher is a very simple situation with very simple goals. You have a killer or a monster or something that has one goal: kill everything. Right? That's and you have a hero or heroes, also one goal: to survive. Either you kill the monster to survive, or you run away and you find a way to escape to where you don't have to deal with that monster ever again. Very simple, and you just let the characters do what they're going to do and just run and see what happens. This film, though, unlike X, this one feels more like a drama. There's more drama in it. There's fun in it, whimsical stuff in it, but it feels more like a drama with, hints of slasher, pieces of slasher things in it. And who the killer is. So it's not like there's this malevolent sort of evil force that wears a mask or whatever it is. This is a straight up. Well, in some ways, Pearl does wear a mask, and but that's sort of metaphoric, and I think that's something that is, she's portrays is one way, and that's not intentional, really. She's got something within her that's not obvious to everyone, but it is to at least one person in the film, and it when it comes out, it's out, and that's what we're dealing with now. Now she's going to be doing what she's doing, and it's something to watch. I'll say that. The other thing I think is interesting is that there aren't a lot of monster films, slasher films, or whatever you want to call them, or both, where you get to understand the why of the slasher. Why is the slasher person killer doing what they're doing? And I don't know. I can't think of one. There might be a couple out there, but I can't think of one where you sort of get to understand the monster, and that's really cool. You feel sorry for the monster too. I think that's something that's it feels original, and that I think helps this movie earn points that I think a lot of movies in the same vein don't get, just because their approach is not like that. You feel for Pearl, and that's a tribute. That's largely the writing is a huge piece of that, because they were really trying to get you to understand this person has a heart too. Yeah, she's doing some crazy things, but it's coming from a universal place, which is really like, she just wants to be loved. Like, all of us want that, and you understand why when things don't go her way, what ends up ultimately pushing her over the edge or whatever it is, that's part of it. It's the wanting to be loved and wanting to be, by a lot of people, but really more than that, just feeling accepted, feeling loved, and by her family, by her husband, by whoever. That's a very relatable feeling. And when you don't have that, that can, that makes people feel all kinds of things. And, sometimes some people, like Pearl, you make decisions that, not all of us would make, but some people make those decisions based on that. It's not an unfounded thing for her to snap when things don't go her way, or things don't go the way she wants them to go, in the ways that she wants them to go. Like, if that makes any sense, that's the so you understand why this monster is making the choices that she's making. And I think that's cool. That's actually a really cool thing. It actually adds some depth to this kind of story. Mia Goth is amazing in the role. She is sufficiently, she makes you afraid of her. She makes you care about her. She makes you, you go on this ride with her, and you really understand you understand. And I think more than anything else, you get to see her heart a little bit. And like, you never see that with Jason, right? You don't see Jason's heart, I mean, not literally. You don't see his, what makes him do the feelings of stuff. There's probably flashbacks and different things that sort of get you to understand the different pieces and stuff, but not like this. And that's cool. I appreciate that about this movie. The other actor I want to single out in this movie, who I think is a standout, next to Mia Goth, she's probably the best addition, the best character in this movie. And that's Tandy Wright, I think. Tandy Wright. And she plays Pearl's mother, her hard-in German mother. She is a force. And you could understand how a character like that, who's grown up in a harsh life in Germany, how she lost a lot, and how that informed how she moved in life, and what that ended up doing to how she raised Pearl, and how that resulted in Pearl ultimately making different changes and things, different moves that resulted in not so good situations. I'm talking around it because I don't want to ruin anything for anything. I mean, you know what it's about already. If you know anything, but I'm sure you've talked about it a lot. I don't want you to get different things from me. I'm not trying to mess up the experience for you. So Pearl makes some decisions and things, and you can see how her mom is a factor in that. That's all I'm going to say about that. But Tandy Wright, she's fantastic. Now we're going to talk about a couple things that I thought were like that took me out slightly of the movie. So certain bits of dialogue, me about this. I'm sure I've mentioned this before. I'm a stickler for stuff like that. If you're doing a period piece, it helps to have language, inflections, and things that feel more appropriate to the time. And for the most part, it's fine, and it's consistent with it's consistent with what you could imagine might be in a film that was made during that time if they made talkie films during that time, during the 1910s or whatever it is. And granted, some of the languaging is different. There's some, again, I want to see a film that has slang of the time and things in it. Again, this film doesn't do that, but it's mostly cool. There's some little bits that take you out a little bit. That's just my little. It feels too modern, almost. It's like right at the. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's just me. My ear hears modern stuff, and I'm feeling like I want to hear more. Not you don't have to have everything like that, but certain stretches of the film should be spoken in the ways they would have been spoken during that time. That's just my 2 cents on that. The other thing is that I thought was that I questioned. You have to make a couple of leaps in logic. At least I did, in the logic of how certain things happen. For instance, when you have someone attacking someone else who is a service veteran, right? They've been in combat. You have someone who's about 5'5" or whatever it is, whatever the size is, smaller than the service vet, not be ready to defend themselves. That's questionable. Now, it's not enough to hurt the movie. It's just one of those things where you go, all right, that's whack. It takes you out of the moment a little bit. But to help it feel in keeping with what the story is being told, you have to go along with it. And I have had no choice, so I got to go along with it. I don't hate that. I just feel like things like that. Then the other thing is, how is another character going to run away with like a 5-minute head start, and then have somebody catch up to you and still jack you up? You had a 5-minute-ish head start. I'm exaggerating, not that long, but you had a pretty big head start. How are you going to still get caught? But again, that's a horror movie trope. That happens. So whatever. Too bad for me, right? I'm not cool. That happens. Other than that, the film is fantastic. The other thing I think is cool that I didn't talk about was the packaging of this film being in the time period is awesome. This film is the closest to what I talk about when I talk about period pieces. I think Todd Phillips' Joker does this too, where the film is packaged as if it were made during that time. From the company logos, production logos, to credits, to music choices. And this film does that perfectly. It feels like you are watching a movie from that time. Like you're in that time period watching a movie from that time. Even down to the scoring, the musical score. I think this is another thing that I think a lot of films, their period pieces, don't do often. I can't think of one that does it like this does, which is the score is like a score from that time where the music is loud, the dramatic pieces, you're like there's like stingers and stuff that you only get, you don't get that in movies today. The music in this film is the most accurate to film scoring at that time, or in the early days of Hollywood. And that's cool. Like, how many people, I don't know how many people pay attention to that, but and it was to the point to where it almost feels jarring. If you're a modern audience goer, a modern audience member like me, there aren't a lot of movies that do that. There aren't any movies that do that, what this movie does. It's like they did in the 1950s or 1940s, or early golden age of cinema time. Watch one of those movies and pay attention to the score. And whatever that's doing, that's what this film does. There is a drama that's way heightened in the music, and a bombast to how things hit when certain things are like major moments. It's like also the music reflects that, and also the transitions. The way the film transitions from scene to scene is indicative of an earlier time of cinema, and that's cool too. You have things like different, not necessarily wipes, but you just watch. You see how there's not a lot of cross dissolves and stuff like you do today, or different types of more modern transitions. Um, there's some of them I can't remember all the different transition terms, but there are a lot that are reflective of an earlier time of film, and I think that's cool too. They really did a good job. And then also then the credits. The credits are a lot. They're just like old. I mean, I wonder how much time it took them. Probably. I mean, it's probably different now because of all the technology you have to make that and make it accurate to what things looked like back in the day. But just look at the credits, and it's the way. They're not scrolling credits. They're the credits where you have a name, and there's like a whole bunch of dots, and then you have another name, or like this character plays this character, or there's like block credits. It's really, it does a lot to really put you in the time mind frame of the time period, and that's really awesome. The other thing separately I want to talk about is how and I think X is a part of this too, to a larger extent. When you look at the early days of cinema and how filmmakers were learning the technology and learning different ways to tell stories and different things to tell stories about, this film touches on early erotica, right? Or adult cinema, what will become adult film, whatever it is. And how, if you look up pornographic film right now, you might find a Wikipedia or several different articles that show clips from films, erotica films during the 1890s, early 1910s, whatever it is. And there's an interesting conversation about how apparently much more widespread that stuff was sort of in Europe than it was here in the U.S. There still is a stigma around adult entertainment, adult films, erotica, things like that. There's a conversation in this film about getting in on the cusp of this new entertainment. The idea that people could pay to see sensual, sexual things. And how the projectionist is one character who is planning on getting in on the action. There's a similar conversation in X, where the film crew, who is making their own more modern adult film, how they're going to get into the home video market, and why, because the stigma is still there. So people can watch this stuff at home in the privacy of their own home and not be judged for it, whatever, right? So there's an interesting sort of parallel with that in that way, with how the films talk to each other about that. The other thing too is the conversation about filmmaking. Both films do this too, but I'm going to keep this one limited to Pearl, because I'm going to save some other stuff for the X discussion. But what's cool is that you have the projectionist who works in a movie theater, who gets to play movies all the time, and we're watching a movie where a character is in love with the movies and sees herself as a star. She wants to be a star, and you get to see the movie within the movie, and that's cool. There's something Shakespearean about that, where we're watching a character watch something on screen who's dreaming of these things, and you get to see pieces of her imagination and what she's thinking about in relation to that. And in terms of filmmaking, how the film, we talked about how it's packaged like a film of the time. And if you want to see it, there's an examination about film of that time, and that's cool to watch a film that pays particular attention to the types of films that came before it, like well before it, and how it pays respect to that. And that's cool. X does this too. They both pay respect to the types of films that they're sort of they pay respect to earlier films, and it shows too that the people behind the camera know what they're doing. They know what time it is, and that's cool to see. If you're curious about Pearl, check it out. It's a good movie to watch. I think it's for nothing else. It's from a technical standpoint, it's fantastic. If you're a film head, see the movie. Like I highly recommend it. Seeing it for just for the technical aspects of it alone, watch the movie. That's one thing, sort of on the surface. The acting is fine. It's fine. Fine acting. Particularly Mia Goth and Tandy Wright. They're the two standouts of this movie. Mia Goth, though, she makes this movie. She owns the movie. This is her movie. Watch for that. And lastly, it's a sufficiently unsettling situation, but not more than you think. So you can get through it. I think if you can get through X, I think you can get through this one. So just beware. Be ready for that. All right, that's gonna do it for this one. So if you stuck around to the end of this video, again, I have to thank you for taking your time to watch this video. Come on back. There's other movies coming up. We got X coming up. We got a few other older movies that are going to be in the mix. So, tune in for that. In the meantime, I'll see you later.